We are back with some more updated NHL trade rumors, and there is so much going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I am just going to focus on them in this video. We're talking about Patrick Marleau, Nikita Zaitsev, and even Mitch Marner. What is going on with the Marner contract? We'll get into all the latest coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. There's all kinds of information and rumors going around about the Toronto Maple Leafs and what moves they might be making. So I wanted to do a dedicated video here just to discuss the Leafs here. We will be getting into other teams here shortly. There's been all kinds of other talk and speculation around the NHL. It's an incredibly busy season. I think it's fair to say, because we've heard it from multiple GMs, that there's more communication going on amongst all the GMs than they've ever seen. And many of these guys have been at it for a long time. So I think we're in for a very busy trade and free agent season here. So certainly stay tuned to the channel. There is going to be a ton of content coming out here over the next couple of weeks. Now let's jump into the latest on the Maple Leafs. I want to get started with Patrick Marleau. Now, Marleau is a player that we know likely is leaving Toronto. It's been discussed here over the past few weeks that he and the Leafs have basically made a mutual decision that he's going to move on from the final year of his contract. But of course, they need to find a trade that works for him. His family reportedly has already gone back to California, and that's where he'd like to be heading as well. Now, Nick Kypreos of Sportsnet's indicated that he has information to say that Marleau only wants to go back to the San Jose Sharks, where he spent majority of his career before signing this free agent contract here with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, of course, Marleau's actual salary is not all that much. He's going to be due a big signing bonus here on July 1st, and the remaining salary after that will be quite small. So the actual dollars to pay Marleau is not much of an issue. The only problem is the $6+ million cap hit. Now, the Leafs are trying to move on so that they can get their other players signed to their contracts. And of course, as far as the Sharks go, they have their own cap problems after the contracts they've signed lately here in the last few days, especially that $92 million contract they gave to number 65 there. So obviously they got their own situation going on. They may be able to welcome back Patrick Marleau, hard to say, but it's certainly not going to be easy. Now, according to Nick Kypreos, the belief out there is that the Leafs and Sharks, to have any chance to facilitate this, would need a third team to get involved. Essentially what would happen is the Maple Leafs would trade Marleau's contract to a third party, and then they would either retain salary and then move him on to the Sharks, or they would do a buyout and then he could sign with the Sharks as a free agent. Now, of course, Patrick Marleau is over the age of 35, so that contract that he signed is basically buyout proof in a sense that if a team buys him out, they do not get any salary cap relief. So obviously that's not something that the Maple Leafs can do. They can't afford to buy him out, and they really can't afford to retain any salary. They need to free up every penny they can get here, especially with the talk that the salary cap may not be increasing as much as we originally thought, and things were already tight even with that projection in place for the Maple Leafs. So obviously if they go to a team who has to spend money to get to the salary cap floor, that'd be your ideal situation. They could either choose to retain up to 50%, which is the most you can do, and trade the remainder to the Sharks. But that still might not work for San Jose either, because they'd still be looking at around a $3 million cap hit, and that still might be too much for them to take on as well. So of course that third-party team, whoever they may be, could buy out Patrick Marleau, so they put the money on the books, but they're not tied to the player anymore. He becomes a free agent, and maybe he would sign a very cheap 1 or 2 year contract with San Jose. I would assume probably a 1 year deal, considering that's what's left on his contract here currently, and then he could finish out his career, maybe making one more stab at a Stanley Cup with the Sharks and his old buddy Joe Thornton. So we'll see what happens here with Patrick Marleau, but if he's going to make it to the Sharks, it's likely going to be through a third-party team to make that happen. There are a few teams out there that have the space and need to spend to get to the floor to make it happen. Obviously, the Leafs would have to add a bit of a sweetener into the deal. No team is going to take that on just for the sake of eating up cap space. They're going to want a sweetener in there, some kind of asset to make it worth their while. Obviously, the Maple Leafs have a lot of solid young players, so it's hard to say who could be added to that deal to make it worth their while. I know their provincial rival, Ottawa's a team to look to. They have all kinds of space, likely a need to spend to get to the floor. They could be a team to get involved, and there's some others as well. So we'll see what happens here, but if you hear of a deal of Patrick Marleau being traded, it very well could be for the purpose of a buyout, making him a free agent. And then from there, obviously he could sign with the Sharks if they'll have him I guess. But either way, he'll have to approve a trade anywhere. So we'll see what happens here with Marleau, if he can return for one last stab at it here with the Sharks. Now, of course, next up, defenseman Nikita Zaitsev has rocketed all the way up to TSN's #1 spot on their trade bait board for the offseason here. Obviously, as we know, he requested a trade from the Leafs, but it was widely believed they were interested in trading him anyways before that ever came to be. There hasn't been a whole lot of updates really recently, except we keep hearing that there's a ton of interest on Zaitsev. We hear the Oilers, we've heard the Canucks, we've heard different teams around the NHL, which I don't really understand. I really don't see Zaitsev as being that good to have that much interest, considering he's got 5 years left on a contract at over $4 million. I can see a team, figuring a way to make this work, especially if the Leafs will add something to the deal to make it worth their while. But it's just hard to imagine that there's really as much interest out there as some of the NHL insiders are letting on. But the team that comes coming up the most is the Vancouver Canucks. But we've also had them linked to several defensemen via trade and free agency. And I honestly believe that General Manager Jim Benning likely is having a ton of conversations with a variety of players and will continue to do so once the free agent interview period opens up here come on June the 23rd, which isn't all that far away. So hard to say which direction the Canucks go. They definitely want to retool their blue line. They want to add some experience for sure, somebody who can move the puck and produce some offense. Not sure Zaitsev's really that guy. So obviously, although he's very different compared to many of the other D-men that they're linked to. We've heard Jake Gardner, we've heard Tyler Myers, we've heard Rasmus Ristolainen, we've heard PK Subban. There's all kinds of names floating around up there, and really Zaitsev is kind of unique in that sense that he's a different kind of player than most of the other ones being mentioned here. So we'll see. All we know right now is there's all kinds of interest according to the insiders. We will see where he lands. It's hard to imagine the Maple Leafs trading him without retaining some of the salary, but I know that's obviously not their preference. I think they'd be more likely to try to add a sweetener to the deal so that they don't have to do that because of the next topic here, which is Mitch Marner. What is going on with the Mitch Marner contract? As we know, Kyle Dubas has said here leading into the offseason that the #1 priority this offseason is to get a deal done with Mitch Marner. And his date he kind of set himself as a deadline, I know unofficially of course, is July the 1st, which makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the Maple Leafs have a major salary cap situation. They're not the only ones in this boat, but it's a big deal. They need to get this contract in place so they know how much money they have to settle all these other contracts in other parts of their team here. They got other RFAs that need to be looked after. They'd probably like to look at some UFAs. They might have some trades they want to look at. And obviously, the money situation really, makes a major impact. Of course, and all this talk about the salary cap maybe not going up as much as we thought is just going to complicate this thing that much more. Now, yesterday, a lot of people kind of got riled up here a little bit after some comments from Bob McKenzie. Basically, what McKenzie was saying here was that if some of the other RFAs, like Mikko Rantanen, for example, so let's say they sign at $9.5 million, and the Maple Leafs come to him and say, well, look, this is a comparable contract. This is what we feel you're closer to. That basically he's going to say, no, that's not my comparable. My comparable is Austin Matthews. I want that kind of money, or don't even talk, basically. So you either pay me or I'm not coming to training camp. That was his, I'm paraphrasing there. That's not the exact quote here. I'll probably put up a quote a little bit more exactly here on the screen so you can get the exact wording. But in a nutshell, that's what he's saying. Now, we've heard Darren Dreger say that he believes the Leafs need to come in with a solid contract offer of probably, at least $10.5 million to get the conversation started. More than likely north of 11 though, after seeing John Tavares be signed for $11 million, and then Matthews get even more than that in his contract not too long ago. Many believe that the Marner camp want Matthews' money, and until that enters the conversation, that things are not going to progress very far here at all. So this really could hold up the Maple Leafs situation, and it really could make things very, very difficult on Kyle Dubas. Now, could he overpay and extend $11.5 million or something to that effect to Marner, and then have three forwards tied up of around 33 plus almost $34 million? That certainly would not put them in a overall great salary cap situation, especially with all the cap news we've had here in the past couple of days, that it might not be going up as much as we thought. It could stay pretty stagnant for the next couple of years as well, so they're not going to get that ever increasing amount to kind of offset new contracts as many of their salary cap experts kind of predict year over year, so they can kind of project contracts out longer term. So they certainly have themselves in a tough situation here. Hard to say what's true. One thing that I will say is Mitch Marner won't make any more money playing for another team than he will for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The endorsements alone are going to make him a bloody fortune. He's already had a ton of commercials. It seems like every time you go on the internet or on the TV, he is quite everywhere. I mean, he's done a lot of commercials, got a lot of endorsements, and that kind of money, he's not going to get that in most other markets. Mitch Marner is very much a beloved player in Toronto, and if he were to leave either via trade or free agency due to contract demands, I think it's fair to say he might become one of the more hated former members of the team in Leaf history, because I think people for the most part love him that much that they would turn against him if this gets ugly. At least that's what I think. So I guess let me know where you think the Marner contract negotiations are going to go. His agent Darren Ferris has a reputation for being really, really difficult like this. Look at his list of other clients and how the negotiations have gone. And I know that for the most part, they haven't really gotten the significant money that they kind of looked like they were asking for in the beginning. So well, hard to say here where this goes. Are the Leafs going to end up overpaying so they don't get caught here too longer term? They don't want a situation like the William Nylander one last year where things drug on well past training camp into the season, right near the wee hours before the deadline so that he couldn't even play. They don't want that to happen with Mitch Marner. It's too much of an impact on the team and too much overall, just not knowing where things are at. It makes it hard to really plan here. So let me know what you think is a fair contract for Mitch Marner and what's going to happen. Is he going to end up getting an offer sheet? Are they going to have to trade him? Because I really don't think Kyle Dubas is really going to want this to drag on too long here. So if they are having that much difficulty come July 1st, obviously they're at risk of an offer sheet. And at the same time, they're at risk here that they might have to just trade him to get this done with and dealt with. I don't think they want to do that, but I guess we'll see how Kyle Dubas reacts and what kind of message he's going to send to this team and how they're going to proceed. So that is all the latest on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, as always, want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. So let me know what you think, especially in the Marner situation. That one's the most interesting. Be interested to see how all this plays out. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.